Welcome, welcome, welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 487 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, not only asked to agree with me, I'm asking you to hear me out. I've been sitting back and listening to a lot of people talk about this Matthew Stafford and Rams situation. And it's been one of the most fascinating things to do. Is just sit back and listen. One reason why it's been so fascinating is because a lot of the angles that you see people take on this situation aren't necessarily wrong. They may be different, but they're not wrong. You see, Matthew Stafford is in a position that is very unique. In fact, I'll even say, which is hilarious, Matthew Stafford is in the position career-wise that the very team that he is on, the LA Rams, were in when they looked to acquire him from the Detroit Lions. Matthew Stafford is in a weird point of his career. And I don't mean weird in a sense of his play. I mean weird in a sense of I think he's trying to combat a lot of norms. And he's trying to, how do I say this? Matthew Stafford is in win now mode. And you'd think that every single team in the NFL is in win now mode, but as we're seeing with this Matthew Stafford situation, not every team is in win now mode. Not every team even wants to be in win now mode. And where I say there's a parallel between his career and the Rams when they were able to get him from the Detroit Lions is the Rams at that time was in win now mode. You had Aaron Donald, you had Von Miller, you had Jalen Ramsey, you had Odell Beckham Jr. You just needed that piece. And Matthew Stafford was looked to be that piece. And obviously at the end of the day, he was. The Rams understood if they got Matthew Stafford now, at that time, he is the perfect piece that can get you over the hump. They were in win now mode. And there's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, we're going to talk about a couple teams later on in the NBA that are trying to be in win now mode. They just don't know exactly how to do it. The Rams saw an opportunity to do it. They had the perfect coach, had the perfect roster. You just needed that perfect quarterback, which they got from Matthew Stafford, and it worked. Well, fast forward today. Obviously, they have a Super Bowl, but you're seeing that the final remnants of that win now team is likely either to be gone or to be drastically changed. Hell, Cooper Kupp looks like he's not going to be there. He was the Super Bowl MVP. And then we talk about Matthew Stafford. And why did I say that there's parallels? While I don't believe the Rams are in win now mode when you look at just the totality of their roster, Matthew Stafford is for sure in win now mode. He has to be. He doesn't have much time to play. He's closer to the end of his career than to the start of his career. He's 37. And this is when I say that I've heard a lot of discord around Matthew Stafford in this Rams situation. For people that don't know the underlining topic, Matthew Stafford has been with the Rams for a minute now. And he is coming towards the end of his deal and would like a new deal. And if the reports are right, I don't know if they're true or not, but if the reports are right, he's asking for or $50+ million a year, being considered one of the highest paid quarterbacks. And if you look at his play, that to me is the most fascinating part about this. Because when you hear some people talk, they keep throwing out the age. And rightfully so. Not everybody is going to be Tom Brady. Not everyone can age like fine wine. And I'm not saying that Matthew Stafford is going to fall off a cliff. But again, you're in a physically daunting sport, and you're about to be 38 years old. So I understand it's like the hesitation to want to give a 37, soon to be 38-year-old. And if you give him a contract extension, by the end of that contract extension, he is very well going to be 40 or 40 plus. So I understand the hesitation around that. It's like, why would you give a 37, 38-year-old quarterback that much money, making him one of the highest paid players? I understand that the league is crazy right now. Like, you have players like Dak Prescott, one of the highest paid players, Trevor Lawrence, one of the highest paid players, but they don't have the playoff success to back up the contract. But then you have Matthew Stafford. While he has the playoff success, the age is working against him. But let's go back to that success for a second. We're not going to talk about the playoffs as much, but I don't think there's any question. Now, this could be because the landscape of the league is different. A lot of the quarterbacks that we thought were going to take that leap into stardom or into superstardom hasn't taken that leap yet. That could be the case. But I don't think that, especially after last year, I don't think that there's any question that Matthew Stafford can comfortably call himself a top 10 quarterback in this league. He has the numbers to back it up. He has the playoff success to back it up. Matthew Stafford is still an elite quarterback. But here's the most fascinating part about this story. I keep saying that. But here's the most fascinating part about this story. Is Matthew Stafford an elite quarterback? Yes. Is he a top 10 quarterback? It's debatable, but yes. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. But all quarterbacks go through waves. You know, all quarterbacks have great days. All quarterbacks have bad days. No one is, even Tom Brady had his off games. When Matthew Stafford is playing the best, I mean, as we saw, he was a drive away. They had 3 turnovers against the Eagles in the playoffs, but he was still a drive away from essentially beating the Super Bowl champions. In the snow, in Philly, he was a drive away from beating the eventual Super Bowl champions. Hell, you saw what he had to do just to get the team to playoff contention. There was a bunch of teams, yes, but out of all the teams that made the playoffs, there was not a team that had to deal with more injury unluckiness than the Rams. Again, teams that made the playoffs. I understand teams like the 49ers probably dealt with more. But for the teams that made the playoffs, I don't think any of those teams had to deal with the injury history that the Rams did last year. So a lot of it was because Matthew Stafford is that type of quarterback. But I've seen, and we saw last year, like I said, everyone, sometimes you have bad days. In life, people have bad days. But when Matthew Stafford is having a bad day, he looks all of 37 years old. He's not a mobile quarterback. He's a smart quarterback. He has he's able to throw in with angles that you may not expect. And he doesn't have a cannon of an arm, but he has an accurate arm. I will say that. But again, when he's up there, he's when he's playing his best, he's a top 10 quarterback. When he's playing his worst, he looks like he should have been retired. And I'm really interested as to what the Rams are going to do. Because I don't see any first of all, he's still on contract, I think, for like another year or two. But I will say that he has outplayed his current contract. So what I am, it's like you're really about to see what the Rams are or where they think they are. Because they've gone out and allowed Matthew Stafford and his camp to seek a trade. And I'm very interested to see what happens around the league in a sense of, does someone like the Steelers is a big name that I hear a lot. Do they go and get Matthew Stafford? Because a lot of people think the Steelers are just a quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender. And last year, Justin Fields nor Russell Wilson was able to get it done, at least in the playoffs. Again, but you're going against the Ravens. But they did lose 6-7 straight. But I think that this is what happens in negotiations, man. You try to cling on to things that strengthen your argument as to why you will or will not do something. And I think the biggest argument that the Rams have as to why they don't want to give Matthew Stafford the contract is you're 37. On top of that, this is when which is why a lot of people have agents and they don't want to represent themselves, because a lot of these teams don't want to have the uncomfortable conversation with these players. I think Matthew Stafford was a huge piece to that Super Bowl caliber team, or to that Super Bowl team that won. But you can also say, well, we had a Hall of Fame defense. And while you were a big part, you didn't even win Super Bowl MVP. It was Cooper Kupp. So why would we pay you? And while I think that you can be a championship caliber quarterback, and as we've seen, you are a championship caliber quarterback, but I don't think you can lead a team to a championship, especially at their age. And Matthew Stafford's like, well, we were one of the most injury-riddled teams last year. And I got us not only to the second round of the playoffs, but again, we were a drive away essentially from beating the soon-to-be Super Bowl champions. I think that he's going to remain a Ram. I think that because I don't know, there's a couple teams that could use him. Like I said, the Steelers are one of them. The Raiders are one of them. But talking about the Steelers, while they think they're a quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl, I don't think that's the case. I think that there's a lot of things that they need to start is the offensive line. Number two is another wide receiver. When George Pickens out the game, their offense shouldn't fall off a cliff the way that it does. And again, Matthew Stafford's not a free agent, so you're going to have to trade a lot for him, especially to get into the realm of money that he wants. You're going to give up a lot, which is going to take them further back from Super Bowl contention, especially when you're in the AFC North. The Raiders is a little different, but does Matthew Stafford want to go to the Raiders and essentially in a rebuild? Especially when you're when you're at this point of your career. Again, it's fascinating what happens with that. I think that all of this is going to result in him remaining with the Rams, but it's just like, I don't know. You're also really seeing how people feel about Matthew Stafford and what they see when they look at Matthew Stafford. It's like, yeah, you're a good player, great player, probably a future Hall of Famer, but you're also 37. And the last thing we want to do is be on the hook. In fact, the last thing you want to do, even though I think a lot of it is due to just off the field stuff, the last thing you want to be is the Jets. And depending on a 40-plus year quarterback who clearly isn't in the same tier as he was when he was playing elite. Now, I think that Matthew Stafford at this point of his career is better than Aaron Rodgers at this point of his career. But again, Aaron Rodgers is over 40. So, we'll see. I'm sorry, y'all. We'll see. Speaking of we'll see, I want to talk about the Knicks for a second. Let's switch over to basketball and let's stay in the. We just got our football topic out the way. Let's stay in this basketball realm. Sort of like the Rams, and sort of like our last topic. I think people will be lying to you. I think the Knicks organization would be lying to you if they didn't think that when they traded Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo for Karl Anthony Towns, when they gave up all those draft picks for Mikal Bridges, when they re-signed OG Anunoby, I don't think, or let me say it like this. They'd be lying to you if they told you that they were not in win now mode. The Knicks are for sure in win now mode. While their future looks a little bit better with the moves that they've made, they are for sure in win now mode. They feel like they have the team to win now. And you don't trade the pieces. You don't trade all those draft picks for Mikal Bridges if you don't think that this is a win now mode team. And that Mikal Bridges is not a win now player, especially with the team that you have. And when you look at the roster, you'd think this is a win now team. Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG. And I after All-Star break, reality starts to creep in for the NBA. Teams essentially understand where their footing is in the championship caliber realm. Either you're a championship caliber team, you're a championship caliber pretender, or you're a middle of the pack team, or you're a bottom feeder hoping to get enough losses that you can compete in the draft. We have the Knicks. When they play their best, They look like an incredible team. You have Karl Anthony Towns shooting the ball all over the place and being a big man. You have Jalen Brunson. That 1-2 combo was great. Josh Hart, if Mr. Does Everything. Like, they look like a great unit. And there's also an argument that a lot of people have had over the years is that the regular season doesn't matter. The regular season doesn't matter. It really only cares about, or what's really only important is the postseason. And while I agree with that to a certain extent, I've always said that you build championship habits in the regular season. While yes, you can slack around and end up getting the 6th or 7th seed and still make some noise, but are you building championship habits? Well, the Knicks are 0-7 against the top tier teams, against the Thunder, against the Celtics, and against the Cavs. And it's not the fact that they're 0-7, it's the fact of they are getting destroyed by these teams. I think they have an average loss of those 7 games. They have an average loss of like 20 points. And the reason why this is such a topic is because it's who do you compare yourself to? The Knicks, with the moves that they made, compare themselves to teams like the Thunder, like the Celtics, like the Cavaliers, who believe that they are also championship caliber teams. And I don't think this year they're in fact, I don't think they're a championship caliber team. Because being 0-7 against them, it's not the fact that if you're 0-7 but you have an average loss of like 3, it's like, okay, we need to clean some things up. That's not a good look at all, but yeah, we're still right there. No, you're losing by 20 plus points. And the thing that doesn't get talked about much when we talk about win now is things, a bunch, especially in a team sport, a bunch of things have to hit. They have to hit simultaneously, or if one thing doesn't go out, or if one thing doesn't work, it's curtains. You're hoping that when you're a Knicks team, and on top of that, outside of Karl Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson, you're a pretty small team. You're hoping that you're going to get the most production that you can out of Karl Anthony Towns. You're hoping that you're going to get the most production you can out of Mitchell Robinson. You're hoping that you're going to get as much production as the Nets were getting from Mikal Bridges. You're hoping that you're going to get the production from OG, from Josh, and that just hasn't been the case. Mikal Bridges it's either he's having an okay game or he is a no-show. OG, I understand, I guess he has his moments, but he's dealing with lingering injuries. And then you have Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson, who have been great, but nobody else really has been consistent. All of these is again, when you look at the pot that you're given, it's like this isn't a championship caliber team, which is unfortunate because again they made these moves thinking that that's what the type of team and that's who they wanted to be. Again, it also doesn't help that like we're getting closer and closer to the playoffs, and the holes and the question that this team had in the beginning of the year are still there, which means that they're kind of getting answered. These are the type of players that you have. Mikal Bridges came into the league or came into the season changing his jump shot and not really being able to shoot the ball. While that is evened out, he doesn't take that many shots anymore. And if he does, he's missing. Karl-Anthony Towns is a great player when he's on, but when he's not, as which we saw in the playoffs last year, when he's not, I think the Knicks are, if we're going to do like contenders or pretenders, I think the Knicks are pretenders. Again, they kind of give off Dallas Cowboys vibes in a sense of you beat on teams that you're supposed to beat. If Portland rolls up to New York, they're more than likely going to get beat bad. Washington, they get beat bad by, But when you go up against teams that you're looking eye to eye, or teams that you'd have to see in the playoffs, or teams that maybe have better records than you, the Knicks are getting embarrassed. So, as much as it sucks, I think that they are legit pretenders. You can't keep folding against the top talent. Folding. Speaking of folding, let's talk about what I believe is the absolute worst situation in basketball right now. And that is the Philadelphia 76ers. Let's just lay out the foundation of what we know right now. For the month of February, Paul George has not scored over 20 points. Joel Embiid and the team are working on what's next when it comes to his knee, because his knee is legit hurt again, and they're saying he's probably going to have surgery, which essentially means you're probably out for the season again. You build a team around a big three: Paul George, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey. But the issue, and the thing that never really gets talked about, is you build a team around the big three. If the big three is not available, if the big three can't play, if the big three has injury concerns, and as we're seeing, injury realizations, then you're building a flawed team. Paul George isn't 100%, but no one's going to feel bad for him because he's on the court. And he continues to make statements. And that's, Paul George coming out saying that we're nowhere close to a championship, or we don't give off the look of a championship team or a playoff team. Paul George, you're one of the biggest reasons why. You're one of the highest paid players in the NBA, bro. They brought you to Philly because they thought that you were the missing piece to a championship caliber team. And you have been god awful. You've been consistently mid, which in your standard has been god awful. The fans have turned on you quickly. And one of the reasons why I said that this is probably the worst situation in basketball is because now you have two players who you would think by the name, by the production, by the history would be, I'm not going to say easy, but would be tradable and can fetch you a mini to large haul in Paul George and Joel Embiid. But now if you sit here and think about it, no team is going to touch either one of them. Meaning the only trade piece you essentially have is Tyrese Maxey. But if you get rid of Tyrese Maxey, that's not only affecting your future, that's essentially saying where you're starting another rebuild, because Tyrese Maxey is the only consistent thing that you have. But I can't say that this has come as a shock to anyone. I think that's why the Philadelphia 76ers fans are so upset. It's not because of where the team is now as much as this. You could see this in the future. Again, you're dealing with two players in Paul George and Joel Embiid that have extensive injury histories. One of which, Joel Embiid, in fact, I think both of them are hurt. They're saying Paul George has to take drugs just to play. Not like those type of drugs, but has to take like shots and stuff just to play to deal with pain. Joel Embiid can barely walk. And while yes, if you take not even early years because he was hurt in his first year. If you take MVP Joel Embiid, if you take Indiana Pacers, if you take Oklahoma City Thunder Paul George, then yes. That trio, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid, those iterations of them is a legit big three and is for sure a championship caliber team. Also have Kelly Oubre. You also have Eric Gordon. Those are championship caliber players. But you don't have Pacers, Thunder, Paul George. You don't have MVP Joel Embiid. You have a Paul George that I guess is looked at to be the leader. But it's very hard to be the leader when you're not playing up to the expectation that the team and that your play warrants you to have. There's no one in the Philadelphia 76ers organization that probably looks at Paul George as a leader, or at least if they do look at him as a leader, every single time they see him, every single time they hear him talk, it has to be with a side eye because it's like, how are you going to tell me? How are you a leader? But here's the thing. Yes, it is very much true that the leader of a team isn't necessarily the best player or isn't always necessarily the best player. You would like for it to be, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the leader of a team is just the best. For instance, while yes, the best player on the Golden State Warriors is Steph Curry, I think the leader, and as we've seen with these with the championships, and as we've seen with the Andre Iguodala jersey retirement, the leader was Andre Iguodala. The leader was Draymond Green. Steph and Clay clearly were the better players and best players, and KD was the best players, but the leaders was Draymond Green and Andre Iguodala. You would think and you would hope if you're the 76ers that the leaders is Joel Embiid and Paul George. However, Joel Embiid is never available due to injury. So how are you going to look for him to be the leader when he hasn't given you anything to lead by? He has one MVP year. But even in that year, he has yet to make it to a conference championship. How can you look at Paul George to be the leader when most of his highlights over the last few years have been on his podcast? And it's like, it'd be different if Paul George is your leader, but he's shelling out 27, 28, 29 points a game. They're still losing. But it's like, all right, yeah, he's the leader of the team. He's doing everything that he can. It's just we're not producing wins. No. Paul George, again, in the month of February, he has not scored 20 points. And don't get me started on the contract extensions. The contract extensions that was given to Paul George, that was given to Joel Embiid, essentially hampering this team. Because again, I don't know a team that is going to touch Paul George or Joel Embiid with a 10-foot pole just because of their injury history. Again, if you're getting the Paul George of old, if you're getting the Joel Embiid of old, then yeah, it makes sense. But you're not. You're getting a Paul George now that talks to the media talking about we're not a championship caliber team, yet Paul George has never been to the championship. That's one. Two, he says that they're not a playoff. They don't have any resemblance of a playoff team, which is true, but a lot of that is because of your play. And the fact of you have been, there's a reason why, this kind of spills over into the topic of worst contracts. It's like, why do people consider some contracts the worst in whatever sport? Like, why was Russell Wilson's contract with the Denver Broncos, considered one of the worst contracts in NFL history? And I think you can open up that conversation and say, why was that contract not considered that when they gave it to him? You see, when the Sixers gave Paul George that contract, it wasn't considered one of the worst in NBA history. It wasn't considered one of the worst in the NBA today. Your play makes it what it is. Russell Wilson, he pretty much got none of the return. Now, I think a lot of it was due to the surroundings, but Russell Wilson didn't help that he didn't play great. Paul George has turned into one of the worst contracts in the NBA because his production hasn't come anywhere close to the contract that he received. Man. So now again, if you were to try to trade for Paul George, you're getting a very expensive player that clearly is dealing with injuries right now, and you would pretty much have to. He's a superstar. He has a superstar contract attached to him, and he has not played anywhere close to superstar status. Same thing with Joel Embiid. The only thing that you have to his resume at this point is he has an MVP, but this is yet another year where it's probably going to get cut short. I think we've probably seen the last of Joel Embiid in the Sixers uniform this year, or at least this season, because reports are saying he's probably going to need another surgery. And I don't think either one of their extensions kick in yet. Boy. And then what do you do with Tyrese? I think Tyrese Maxey just signed a deal, but like you're paying three people that much money, and you're not even you probably won't even make the playoffs. That is insane. You're paying three people damn near the max, and you're probably not making the playoffs. Talk about reality. Philly has become the most tough situation, and they have the most tough situation in the NBA by far. By far. You want to know a close number two, though? The Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are kind of in the same boat. They're just using different paddles. Figuratively, of course. And I sense of the Phoenix Suns is the perfect example and the perfect child to the thought of, or to the saying, Big Three just doesn't mean Big Three. What I mean by that is a big three doesn't just mean three great players. There has to be uniformity. There has to be. When you look at most of the big threes in NBA history, the reason why they worked wasn't just because those three, but it was because the three players in question complemented each other. Like when you look at the Spurs, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili. Manu Ginobili was that kickstart player that came off the bench and gave them the spark. Tim Duncan is widely considered the best big or power forward in NBA history. Then you have Tony Parker, who facilitated the offense. You also had great players around him: Bruce Bowen, Rick Barry, Steven Jackson, Boris Diaw, young Kawhi Leonard, Danny Green. When you look at the Bulls, Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman was nowhere close to an offensive weapon. However, he was widely considered one of, if not the best, rebounding player ever. And he didn't care about scoring. He just said, I'm just going to rebound, and I'm going to play defense. Scottie Pippen, even though now we see Scottie didn't like his role, but while they were playing, Scottie was the perfect number 2 to Jordan. LeBron, D. Wade, Chris Bosh. They complemented each other. D. Wade was a better scorer. LeBron James was just the best player. He could do everything. And then Chris Bosh was the big man and probably the best shooter out of those three. But you also had Ray Allen. You also had Mike Miller. You also had Shane Battier. You also had, the players at the Joel Anthony. Udonis Haslem. Like, they had a team. When you look at this Phoenix Suns team, their big threes don't complement each other at all. Devin Booker, KD, and Bradley Beal. They're three players that do literally the exact same thing. While, yes, I would say that KD is probably the best out of all of them, or all three, but there's nothing that KD does that Bradley Beal doesn't also do. There's nothing that Bradley Beal does that Devin Booker does not. In fact, let me say this. Everything that maybe Kevin Durant isn't strong at, Devin Booker and Bradley Beal are also not strong at that. Not one of them are consistent defenders. Not one of them are really pass happy players. They need rhythm, so they score. It's just three players that do the same exact thing. And the worst part about all of it is you built a team. It also shows that teams are important, bro. Again, you can talk about the Golden State big three. Steph, KD, or Steph, Clay, and Draymond. But you had a team that built around them. And you had players like Andre Iguodala. You had players like Sean Livingston. You had players like Andrew Bogut or JaVale McGee, David West. You had players that David Lee at the time. You had players that fit perfectly. This team just is a bunch of players that wear the same jersey. I don't listen because I think that he has a tough time, in my opinion, taking his biases out. But it's his platform, so he can have whatever bias he wants. You know what I mean? But I have a tough time sometimes listening and following Bill Simmons, because Bill Simmons, again, he is rooted in what he feels, rightfully so, and it's very hard to get him off that, even if he's dead wrong. But Bill Simmons went on his podcast, the Bill Simmons podcast, and talked about just how it felt watching the Suns live. And one thing that I would agree, and one thing that I think was eye-opening to me, and you see all the signs, you just don't want to admit it. When you're 1-7 in your last 8 games, there are signs, especially when you have your team, full team, pretty healthy, and everyone's playing. But when it's the little things that make a team. Look at the Thunder. Look at after every win, when you have somebody talking to the media, you have the whole team behind them. Or when somebody falls down, damn near the 4 players on the court rush to try to go pick them up. Or when somebody has a big dunk and people look at the bench and how crazy the bench goes. The fans are always going to be ecstatic, but what do your players, what do your colleagues, how do they react? If you cross somebody up, how do they react? If you have 30 points and your career high is 35, do they try to get you over that 35 threshold? It's little things like that. When you go to the bench, do you make sure you greet and dap everyone? Even if your seat is right next to the coach, do you go down the line and dap up everyone? When you go into a huddle, how close are you? Are you paying attention? It's all little things like that build team chemistry, and that really shows you if a team is a championship caliber team or not. Obviously, you need great players, but, it's the little things. And Bill Simmons expressed that the Suns don't do any of the little things. Meaning, Kevin Durant yelling at his coach a couple times after their game, I believe it was against the Bulls. Or, you subbing out and Devin Booker not dapping everyone up, or when you're at the free throw line and Kevin Durant's at the other end just trying to gather himself. It's just little stuff like that. And while it may not be conveyed through camera and you may not be able to see it, as a fan, you're looking like that. You kind of see why this team is where they are. And it kind of was, you kind of saw this coming. Again, if this were to have worked, if this big three of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal worked, it would be the first time in NBA history that a team was successful off 3 players that did the exact same thing. They occupy the same exact part of the court, meaning when one person has the ball, 2 people are just sitting there watching, waiting for them to get the ball. It's like, it's not team ball. And it's no coincidence this team's not good defensively. When your 3 best players are not defensive players. And what's interesting is, not interesting, but what's further proof of team, that when Kevin Durant was on Golden State, and Golden State, I understand having Steph, Clay, you think that their foundation is offense, but no, the foundation of those championship Golden State teams are defense. It's no coincidence that Kevin Durant played the best defense of his career when he was in Golden State. When you look today, it is also very interesting how we look at Kevin Durant and how I think his decision making has defined his career. Not the fact that he is, I think, undoubtedly one of the greatest players we've ever seen, undoubtedly one of the greatest scorers we've ever seen in the history of the NBA. But your decision to leave Russell Westbrook and the Oklahoma City Thunder to go to Golden State, that's always been the topic of conversation, talking about Kevin Durant after that move. And to be honest with you, I don't think that was a bad move. Yeah, it looked a certain way, seeing as though the Golden State Warriors just beat them. But you went to a perfect situation for you. You didn't have to take over 100% of the time. It was an offense that predicated ball movement and scoring. I don't think Kevin Durant picking Golden State was a bad decision at all. I just think people were upset because people also knew the after effects, the ramifications that it meant, or what it meant to have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Kevin Durant on the same team. They knew that was a daunting, on Golden State at that was a daunting situation. But I think it was perfect. Where the decision making really comes from is after that. Like your decision. And I'm not here questioning why someone would make the decisions that Kevin Durant made. I'm just, and obviously hindsight is 2020. You don't know until you don't know, but some things you kind of can see coming. And what's interesting is all the negative what ifs for every decision that Kevin Durant has made outside of, basketball decision, outside of going to Golden State has happened. Everything that could have backfired has backfired. You leave a stable organization in Golden State to go to an unstable organization in Brooklyn. And at the time, I will give him credit. He has matured. He has changed. But at the time, you go from a stable running mate in and Steph Curry to an unstable running mate at the time in Kyrie Irving. You also bring in unstable James Harden. And while, yes, it almost worked, injuries played a part. Kyrie got hurt. James Harden got hurt with his hamstring, and you were unable to beat the Bucks. I think if they would have beat the Bucks, they probably wouldn't have won the championship that year. But if was a fifth, we all be drunk. Then you decide, okay, I'm gonna go to Phoenix, a team that has a star who all he really does is score. And understandably so, rightfully so, I guess I can say. Devin Booker is one of the best offensive players we've seen in the NBA. But you go to an unstable organization. I think that's what the biggest indictment was. An unstable organization. An organization that was in change. An organization that has been in flux. An organization that hasn't really got anything right. They've had Charles Barkley. They've had Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, Jason Richardson, Joe Johnson, Sean Marion, Raja Bell, Devin Booker. They've had all these players. Eric Bledsoe when he was good. They've all these players. And not one championship. But you say, I'm going to go there. I'm going to take my talents to... We could have went to Miami. But I'm going to take my talents to Phoenix. And what do? You trade for what I originally thought was the most untradeable player in the league because of the trade clause in Bradley Beal. You form a big three of three players that do the exact same thing, and now you look, you're fighting for an 11th seed. You're probably not even going to make the play-in. And on top of that, it's almost a foregone conclusion that Kevin Durant, is going to get traded at the end of this year because that's the only move that can make. You're not going to trade Devin Booker because he's the face of your franchise because he was there before you. He's a fan favorite. You're not going to trade Devin Booker. And you can't trade Bradley Beal because he has a no trade clause. So he'll just veto any trade that he doesn't want, which we saw at the trade deadline when they were trying to get Bradley Beal to Miami for Jimmy Butler. But Bradley Beal kept shooting that down. So a team that is strapped on money, that has absolutely no options outside of one, and that's trade Kevin Durant. You know, if you would have told me that the last time Kevin Durant not only won a championship, but the last time that Kevin Durant stepped on a NBA Finals court was in 2019 with the Golden State Warriors, shockingly, I don't think there would have been much disbelief there. Especially when you see the organizations that he went to and the running mates that he picked. Sucks. But the Phoenix Suns is a perfect example of what a big three looks like, that don't really complement each other. They just do the same thing. Lastly, before we go, we have the unpopular topic of the day. The question is, how far can this Lakers team go with a Luka Doncic and LeBron James? We just saw them the other night destroy the Denver Nuggets. And I believe that was the best that this Lakers team as a whole has looked like all year, especially with Luka. Luka hasn't been playing well with the Lakers, probably because he's still trying to get over the whole trade thing. But that was the best Luka has looked. That was the best Luka has looked with LeBron. And that was the best the whole team essentially has looked all year against the Nuggets the other night. And, of course, you're hearing people say, oh, this team is a conference finals favorite, conference finals lock. You hear Shannon Sharp, Lakers in 5. So, understandably, fandom and hopes are high when we talk about this Luka, LeBron James, Lakers era that we're in. Obviously, after beating the Denver Nuggets, who has Nikola Jokic and, has also playoff and championship aspirations. And I also hear a lot of people saying Luka led a team to a conference championship. He also led a team to the NBA Finals. So what do you think he's going to be able to do with arguably the greatest player of all time, LeBron James? And I understand that argument. But here's my thing. When you really dissect those teams that Luka led, I'm not saying that Luka didn't lead those teams. Luka clearly was the best team player on the teams. But you also had players on those teams that did things that Luka doesn't do and complimented Luka. I will say this until somebody proves me wrong. Every single NBA champion, I believe, has a foundation of defense. There's only been a few, maybe one or two. I think there's either been one or two teams that have been outside. Since 2000, there's been one or two teams that's been outside the top 10 in defensive rating. And one of them had Shaq and Kobe. I understand the allure of wanting to pick the Lakers and, loving what we're seeing from LeBron and Luka, but I'm just saying, hold on. If you think Dorian Finney-Smith, if you think Jackson Hayes, if you think Rui, if you think Austin Reeves are going to get it done, then they could. They may be. Who knows? But one thing that only one of them has in common is they play defense. LeBron is at an age where he's not able to play defense consistently, and Luka has never played defense consistently, which actually is one of the biggest reasons why he has a Lakers jersey on right now. I think that this team can be really good. I think that this team can be really exciting. I think this team can be really fun to watch. But do I think this team is a championship caliber team? No. I know people say nobody's scared of the Thunder. I know people say nobody's scared of Denver. Nobody's scared of the top tier teams in the West. And usually that conversation is talked about when we talk about the Lakers. We talk about someone like Golden State, because Golden State looks really good right now after getting Jimmy Butler. But enjoy the moment. And I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm just seeing what I see. I just don't think that this Lakers team with Luka and with Bron are a championship caliber team. Not because of those two, but because of how the team is constructed. They still don't. Their big man is Alex Len or no Jackson Hayes. Yeah, I don't see it, but we'll see. It was exciting, and they did play their best basketball against the Nuggets the other night. So. And lastly, before we go, I want to acknowledge Diana Taurasi. There's a reason why she is widely considered one of, if not the greatest women's basketball player to ever live. It's not just the fact that she played for 20 years. It's not just the fact that she played for 20 years on one team. It's not just the fact of she is widely considered one of the most accomplished women's basketball players to ever play, whether you talk about 3 NBA championships, 2 Finals MVPs, an MVP. She's 11-time All-Star, 10-time first team, 4-time second team. She won the Rookie of the Year, 5-time scoring champ, 6-time peak performer. She's on the 15th, 20th, and 25th anniversary team. I'm not going to go over all of her accomplishments. She's even a 3-time NCAA champion. She has accomplished she's accomplished more in her career than multiple teams have ever accomplished in their lifetime, whether you talk about the WNBA or even the NBA. Hell, she herself has more WNBA championships than the Wizards have championships as an organization. Sucks. But it's not just the fact that she is the model of consistency. You don't get all the accolades that you get. You don't play for 20 years and you're not good. You don't play for 20 years and not have a level of consistency that a lot of people don't see. I think one of the reasons why she's widely considered one of the greatest is because I know a lot of people don't think about it, but the WNBA is very young. It has not been around that long. And when you look at a lot of the names that people widely consider GOATs, so when you look at some of the names that are attached to the WNBA, you have Lisa Leslie, you have Maya Moore, you have Rebecca Lobo. There have been a lot of great names that have come to the WNBA. Hell, there's a lot of great names in the WNBA right now. But one of the names that has been a constant, obviously, for 20 years has been Diana Taurasi. There's a lot of times when the WNBA had scrutiny. There's been a lot of times where it was on the fringe of imploding. It was on the fringe of not sustaining. But one person that stood tall and one person that continued to exude excellence on and off the court was Diana Taurasi. So, at her very experienced age of 42, I want to say congratulations to Diana Taurasi for officially announcing her retirement from the game of basketball. Not only will she be missed, but her presence has been very important for the WNBA, like I just iterated. And I think what's disappointing, because nothing about this is disappointing outside of the fact that she's retiring, but what I think is disappointing for a lot of Phoenix fans is a lot of them wanted her to come back. And while, yes, you can tell the age was starting to catch up to her, she did just win an Olympics with, Asia Wilson and Breonna Stewart and all them. I want to say again, congratulations to Diana Taurasi for a very successful career. I know people are going to say, well, what about a farewell tour? But you kind of felt that was what it was last year, seeing as though there was a lot of times you see her minutes were getting cut and they were just doing a lot. And a lot of people don't like farewell tours. I know Kobe had an interview after, rest in peace to Kobe, obviously, but after his retirement, and he said he wished he didn't announce it before the season because he didn't like the farewell tour. He didn't like other teams stopping the game to acknowledge him, people coming up for interviews or people coming up for autographs and stuff because they knew that this was it. Kobe was very vocal in saying that he wished he would have done that differently. And I don't know Diana Taurasi from a can of paint. Obviously, I'm sure the fans would want a farewell tour, but she didn't. So, and when you get to 20 years, when you get to accomplish the things that she's accomplished, I think that it's a blessing that you're able to go out the way that you want to go out. So, again, congratulations to Diana Taurasi for an incredible 20-year career. Congratulations for being one of the most accomplished basketball players the world has ever seen. Whether it's as that's including college, overseas, and the W. And congratulations, Diana Taurasi, for being widely considered one of, if not the greatest basketball players of all time. You can say that the W owes everything to Diana Taurasi, or Diana Taurasi owes everything to the W, but it goes hand in hand. I don't think there would be the W. I don't think it would be as popular if it did not have Diana Taurasi carrying it for a lot of the years that she carried it. So congratulations on a successful career, and I hope that you enjoy whatever's next. But thank you for giving us basketball fans 20 years of memories. Congratulations, your retirement. that has been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, a link in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I appreciate everyone that continues to spread the word about the Unpopular Podcast. It means a lot. If you haven't subscribed yet, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe. It means so much to me. Also, for all my DSP listeners, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you hear this luscious voice of mine, please follow, please subscribe. No platform is more important than the other, and I need everyone if I want to grow the podcast. So please subscribe. It means a lot. Also, follow the socials. Follow Instagram, follow TikTok. I post pretty much daily there. That's where you get reels. That's where you get stories. If you want to go back and forth with me, just leave in the comments. That's probably the quickest way to get to me. You keep respectful. I don't mind going back and forth. It just means that you're passionate about whatever we're talking about and you're listening to me. Both I appreciate. So all the socials, please follow. Until next time, much love.